There are boxes you open without thinking, and there are boxes that change the shape of a week before you've even lifted the lid. Mine arrived on a Thursday afternoon in November, set on the corner of my clinic desk by our front desk girl, wrapped in the same brown paper Barnes & Bloom always used, tied with the same plain twine. I almost didn't open it right away. I had 3 more patients before 5 o'clock and a stack of charts taller than my coffee mug. But something about the weight of it, lighter than the usual bundle of lilies, off balance in a way I couldn't place, made me set my pen down. Inside, beneath a single spray of white lilies, was an envelope that didn't belong there, not cream-colored and crisp like a florist card. This one was yellowed at the corners, soft as cloth from age, my name written across the front in a hand I hadn't seen in 15 years, a hand I had watched write prescriptions, write recommendation letters, write my name into speeches he gave about the future of this profession. A hand that belonged to a man I had buried. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. His name was Dr. Virgil Hooper, and for 2 years during my residency, he was the closest thing I had to a compass. He taught me how to hold a scalpel and how to hold a grieving parent's hand in the same steady grip. He died in a car accident on a rain-slicked bridge outside Nashville 15 years ago, 3 years before I ever met my husband. I spoke at his memorial. I planted a dogwood tree in his name outside the children's wing he helped build. I had, in every practical sense, buried him. So when I turned that envelope over and saw his handwriting, my first thought wasn't grief. It was fear. The specific, cold fear of a woman who has spent her whole career trusting her own eyes and her own judgment, suddenly unsure whether either one could be trusted at all. 3 questions sat in my chest the rest of that afternoon, and none of them had comfortable answers. Why was a letter from a dead man arriving inside a florist's box 15 years late? Who at Barnes & Bloom had been holding it, and why now? And if Virgil Hooper had truly written these words the week he died, what, exactly, had he been trying to tell me before it was too late to say it? My husband would ask me, later that night, why my hands hadn't stopped shaking since dinner. I didn't have an answer for him yet, not one I could say out loud. If you haven't watched any of my other stories, let me tell you plainly who I am, because everything that happened with that envelope only makes sense if you understand what I'd already survived to get there. My name is Renee Winters. I'm 43 years old, a pediatrician here in Louisville, Kentucky, and I have spent more of my adult life inside hospitals than outside them. I have a husband, Nathaniel, who has loved me through more of my worst hours than I probably deserved. We have 2 children, my 15-year-old daughter, sharp-tongued and fiercely loyal, and my 8-year-old son, who still thinks his mother can fix anything, which is a kind of faith I try very hard not to break. My mother-in-law has never made that job easy, and my father-in-law has, more than once, been the only person in that family willing to simply tell me the truth. Just a few months ago, my husband and I nearly came apart over a mystery that had nothing to do with an affair and everything to do with a widowed shop teacher named Solomon Ray, who had spent 12 years leaving lilies on my car every Monday morning to thank me, quietly and anonymously, for saving his infant daughter's life. That story ended the way most true things do, without a clean bow. My marriage survived it, bruised. Solomon and I found a strange, careful peace, and Barnes & Bloom, the little flower shop that had unknowingly delivered his gratitude for over a decade, became something like a landmark in my own life, the way certain intersections become landmarks after something happens there. I tell you all of that only because it explains why, when Adrienne, the shop's owner, a woman I'd come to trust, called to say she was closing out her late aunt's old order ledgers and wanted to send me one final no-charge bouquet as a thank you for how gently I'd handled the whole Solomon Ray affair in the community, I said yes without a second thought. I expected lilies and a card signed with Adrian's looping handwriting. I did not expect a 15-year-old letter to fall out from between the stems, tucked into the bottom of the box like something waiting patiently to be found. Because here is the part of my life I don't talk about on this channel very often. Before Nathaniel, before my children, before I ever set foot in Louisville, I trained under a man named Virgil Hooper at a teaching hospital in Nashville. He was the chief of pediatric surgery, silver-haired even then, with a laugh that filled a hallway and a habit of showing up at 3 in the morning just to sit with families in waiting rooms, uninvited and unpaid. He built a charity wing for children whose families couldn't afford care. He mentored me the way you mentor someone you believe will outlast you in the field. And then, 3 years before I even met Nathaniel, he was gone. Killed instantly, the hospital told us, when his car went off a bridge in a storm. I gave a eulogy at a memorial service with an empty casket because the accident had been catastrophic enough that an open casket wasn't offered as an option. I never questioned that. Why would I have? Grief doesn't usually come with an asterisk. I moved to Louisville. I built a career, a marriage, a family, on the foundation he'd helped me pour. I thought about him often. Every time I signed a chart the way he'd taught me to. Every time I sat with a frightened parent instead of rushing past. But I had, in every sense that mattered, closed that door. There is a particular kind of grief that comes from losing a mentor rather than a parent or a spouse. Quieter, less socially recognized, but no less load-bearing. Nobody sends a casserole when you lose the person who taught you how to be good at the thing you do for a living. I went back to work 3 days after his memorial because there was no bereavement category on the hospital's forms for what he was to me, and I told myself that was fine. That grief doesn't need a form to be real. I carried him instead in smaller ways. The particular way I still fold my hands before I deliver bad news to a family, a habit I lifted directly from watching him do it 100 times, the dogwood tree, now 15 years tall, that I still visit every spring whether I mean to or not. Nathaniel knew the outline of all this, the way spouses know the outline of griefs that predate them. A name mentioned at the right moments, a photograph in an old box, a silence that would settle over me every November without either of us naming why. He had never met Virgil Hooper and never would, and until that Thursday, that had simply been one more fact about my life he'd made peace with. The way you make peace with all the rooms in your spouse's history you never got to stand in yourself. Until a Thursday afternoon, when his handwriting came back to open it. I didn't open the letter at my desk. I sat there with it in my lap through my last patient of the day, a 6-year-old with an ear infection, his mother apologizing for how squirmy he was, me nodding and smiling and hearing almost none of it. And then I locked my office door and finally slid my finger under the flap. The paper inside had gone soft at the folds, the ink faded to a brownish gray, but the handwriting was unmistakably his. Long, looping capital letters. The same hand that had signed 100 discharge orders I'd watched him write. Renee, if you are reading this, it means I finally did the one thing I swore for years I wouldn't. I am asking Marguerite at the flower shop to hold this until she believes enough time has passed that it can't hurt anyone still living. Maybe that's cowardice. I've had a long time to make peace with being a coward. There are things about the Children's Fund you deserve to know, and things about the night on the bridge that were not what the hospital told you. I am not dead, Renee. I wish I could tell you I was, because the alternative is so much harder to forgive. Ask Sherwin Talbot what he signed his name to. Ask him what he owed me. I am sorry. I am so sorry. VH. I read it 4 times before the words fully landed. Then I read it a 5th time, out loud, in an empty office, just to hear whether it sounded any more real spoken than it did on paper. It didn't. Marguerite, the letter said. Adrian's late aunt, the shop's original owner, the woman who had first started Solomon Ray's standing lily order all those years ago without ever telling a soul. She had been holding this letter too for 15 years, and she had died. Adrian had mentioned it once, in passing, during the Solomon Ray affair, without ever handing it over. It had sat in a locked drawer of undelivered orders, until her niece, closing out the books for good, had finally opened that drawer and found 2 ghosts waiting inside instead of one. I called Nathaniel before I called anyone else, because that is the marriage we have built, the one where even the parts of me I don't understand yet get spoken out loud to him first. He came home early. He read the letter twice at our kitchen table, his jaw working the way it does when he's trying not to say something before he's sure it's the right thing to say. Renee, he set it down like it might still be warm. This says he's alive. It says he was alive 15 years ago when he wrote it. My voice came out steadier than I felt. I don't know what he is now. My mother-in-law, Geraldine, happened to be at our house that evening. She and my father-in-law had come for Sunday dinner 2 days early because of a scheduling mix-up neither of them would fully own up to. And when she caught sight of the name Virgil Hooper over Nathaniel's shoulder, her face did something I'd never seen it do before. It went perfectly, deliberately still. You knew him, I said. It wasn't a question. I knew of him, Geraldine said, too quickly, smoothing a napkin that didn't need smoothing. Your father-in-law and I attended a gala for that children's fund of his, years ago, before you and Nathaniel were even engaged. Everyone in this city who gave money to anything gave money to Virgil Hooper's fund. She wouldn't meet my eyes. It was a very generous cause. Geraldine. My father-in-law, Harold, said her name the way he says it, when he already knows she's about to leave something out. Tell her what you told me at the time. She set the napkin down. There were whispers at the very end that the fund's books didn't add up the way they should have. I never gave it much thought. Rich men's charities always have whispers. Her eyes finally lifted to mine, and for once, there was no performance in them at all. I am sorry, Renee. I didn't think it was mine to bring to you. I still don't know that it is. I sat with that letter until midnight, long after everyone else had gone to bed, turning one name over and over until it wore a groove in my thinking. Ask Sherwin Talbot what he signed his name to. I barely slept that night, and when I finally did drift off, I dreamed the way I hadn't dreamed about him in years. Not the accident, which I'd never actually witnessed and therefore could never accurately imagine, but the ordinary things. His office at 2 a.m, the smell of the vending machine coffee he refused to give up despite every joke the residents made about it, the particular way he used to say my name when he was about to teach me something important, drawing it out like he wanted to make sure I was truly listening before the lesson started. Renee? Just like that, on the envelope, 15 years later, as if no time had passed for him at all, even though clearly it had, for him, and for whoever he'd become in whatever life came after the one I'd grieved. I got up at 5, before the house was awake, and sat at the kitchen table with the letter again, this time with a legal pad beside it, the way I approach any chart that doesn't add up. I wrote down every name in the letter. Marguerite. Sherwin Talbot. I wrote down every date I could reconstruct. The accident, the memorial, the years since. I wrote down the one line that kept circling back to the front of my mind, no matter how many times I tried to set it aside. There are things about the Children's Fund you deserve to know. Virgil hadn't just confessed to being alive. He'd confessed to something unfinished, something that had outlived whatever version of him had written those words. And I understood, sitting there in the gray dawn light with my children still asleep upstairs. that I wasn't going to be able to simply file this away and go back to my ordinary Friday. I didn't know a Sherwin Talbot, not yet, but by morning, I intended to. A name is a strange thing to hold on to in the dark. By the time the sun came up, I had already decided I wasn't going to sit on this the way Geraldine had sat on her whispers for 20 years. I called the one person in this city I trusted with old, buried paperwork, Ramona Huffman, the medical records administrator who had helped me track down archived files twice before, back when I still believed record keeping was the dullest job in any hospital. Ramona did not believe that, and she had never once let me believe it either. Sherwin Talbot, she repeated back to me over the phone, and I heard her typing before she'd even finished saying it. That name rings a bell, but let me pull something before I say anything I can't back up. 20 minutes later, she called back, quieter than before. Dr. Sherwin Talbot was the medical examiner who signed off on Virgil Hooper's death certificate 15 years ago. Traffic fatality, bridge collapse of the guardrail, body recovered downstream 2 days later and cremated at the family's request before a full forensic workup was completed. Renee, that's not how we do it. Not for a public figure. Not without dental confirmation. Unless somebody wanted it done quickly, I said. Unless somebody wanted it done quietly, Ramona said back. I want to pause here and say something for anyone new to my channel. I did not go looking for this. I have built a life out of trusting the paperwork, trusting the process, trusting that the people who sign their names to something are telling the truth when they do it. Every instinct I had wanted to close that drawer, thank Ramona for her time, and go back to being a woman who grieved a good man cleanly, without an asterisk. But I kept hearing his voice in that letter. I am not dead, Renee. And I have never once, in 20 years of medicine, been able to walk past a chart that didn't add up. The children's fund Virgil had built, the one Geraldine remembered whispers about, still existed under a different name, folded years ago into a larger regional foundation. Its current board chair was a man named Grant Hooper, Virgil's nephew, who had inherited both the family name and, as far as the public record showed, a modest annual stipend for his continued involvement. When I requested an informal meeting with him, framed only as a former colleague hoping to update her memory of Virgil for a hospital tribute wall, Grant agreed almost too readily, and something about his eagerness put me on edge before I'd even shaken his hand. He was younger than I expected, maybe 35, sharply dressed, with his uncle's easy smile stretched a little too wide over something guarded underneath. He talked for 20 minutes about his uncle's legacy without once looking uncomfortable, until I mentioned, almost offhand, that I'd recently come across some old paperwork suggesting the fund's books hadn't always balanced the way they should have in Virgil's final year. His smile didn't drop. Exactly. It just stopped reaching his eyes. I wouldn't know anything about that, he said. I was barely 20 when my uncle died. Whatever happened with the money, that's ancient history. And frankly, Dr. Winters, I'd rather it stayed that way. Digging it up doesn't help the kids the fund serves today. It just gives people a reason to stop giving. And what she found next made her question everyone she thought she could trust. But before we go any further, if this story has you hooked already, do me a favor and drop a like on this video so more people see it. For 2 days, I genuinely believed Grant Hooper himself might be the one holding something back. Perhaps continuing to draw a stipend from a fund built on numbers his uncle had quietly padded. Perhaps protecting a family name more than he was protecting the truth. It was Ramona who talked me back off that ledge. I pulled his financials as far as public record lets me. She told me over coffee in the hospital cafeteria. Grant Hooper's stipend has been documented and audited every single year since he took over the board. He wasn't even out of college when the fund's original numbers went sideways. Whatever he's protecting, Renee, it isn't money. I think he's just a young man trying not to find out something ugly about a man he loved. That left one name standing alone in the dark, Sherwin Talbot. He had retired from the medical examiner's office 9 years ago and now lived, according to the one address Ramona could confirm through public filings, in a small house 40 minutes outside the city. I drove out there on a Saturday morning, my hands tighter on the wheel than I wanted to admit, my mind circling the same question the entire way. What does a man like that say when a dead man's letter finally comes looking for him? Before we get to that answer, if you're the kind of person who likes guessing where a story is headed before it gets there, drop your theory in the comments and hit that notification bell so you don't miss what happens next. I want to back up for a moment because the 2 days between meeting Grant Hooper and finally working up the nerve to drive out to Sherwin Talbot's house were some of the hardest of this entire ordeal, and not for the reasons I expected. It wasn't the mystery that wore on me, it was my own family. Nora, my 15-year-old, found me crying quietly in the laundry room one evening, an ordinary, humiliating place to be caught grieving a man she'd never heard of, and instead of retreating the way teenagers often do when a parent's sadness makes them uncomfortable, she sat down on the floor next to the dryer and asked me to tell her about him. I hadn't told that story to my own daughter in 15 years. Not really. Not past the outline. I told her about the dogwood tree. I told her he used to keep peppermints in his coat pocket for scared kids in the waiting room, and that I still do the same thing now, in my own coat, without ever having decided to on purpose. She held my hand through most of it, and at the end she said something that stuck with me longer than almost anything else that week. "Mom, it sounds like you're not just trying to find out what happened to him. You're trying to figure out if it's okay that you loved him this much." She wasn't wrong. She rarely is, these days, though I'd never tell her that directly. My son, meanwhile, noticed only that I seemed distracted, and being 8, handled it the way 8-year-olds handle everything, by drawing me a picture of what he assumed was going on, a stick-figure doctor standing next to a flower shop, with a speech bubble that just said, "Mom will fix it," taped to the refrigerator where it stayed through the rest of this whole affair. A small, stubborn piece of faith I badly needed and hadn't asked for. Ramona, for her part, kept digging even after I told her she didn't have to. She pulled 15-year-old news archive clippings about the accident, cross-referenced them against the fund's public tax filings from that same year, and found exactly what she suspected she would. A 6-month gap in the fund's audited financials right before Virgil's death, quietly closed out afterward by a board resolution citing administrative restructuring following a tragic loss. Language vague enough that no reporter at the time had thought to ask a second question. "People don't investigate grief, Renee," she told me, sliding the printouts across her desk. "That's exactly why it works as cover, if you're desperate enough to use it that way." She was right, and it unsettled me more than any single document she'd found, because it meant the system I'd spent my whole career trusting had a blind spot built directly into its kindness. Nobody wants to be the one asking hard questions of a grieving family, and Virgil Hooper, whoever helped him or didn't, had understood that better than anyone. I sat in my car outside Sherwin Talbot's house for nearly 10 full minutes before I found the nerve to knock. When I finally did, an older man opened the door in a cardigan, the color of weak tea, and the moment I said the name Virgil Hooper out loud, something in his face simply gave way, like a dam that had been holding for exactly as long as it could, and not one day longer. "I always knew somebody would come," he said. "I just thought it would take longer than 15 years. Sherwin Talbot didn't invite me in so much as step aside and leave the door open, the way a man does when he's already decided he no longer has the energy to keep a door closed. His living room smelled like old coffee and older regret. He sat down across from me without being asked and started talking before I could even get my first question out, as if he'd rehearsed this confession alone in that house for a decade and a half, waiting for an audience that never came. "Virgil came to me 11 days before that car went into the river," he said. not asking me to help him disappear. Not at first. He came to me because an internal audit at the Children's Fund had found almost $400,000 misdirected over 6 years, routed through a shell vendor into a private account. And he swore up and down to me it wasn't his hand that did it. He said his own signature had been forged on the authorization forms by someone inside his own office, someone he trusted, and that by the time he found it, the fund's reputation was already one bad headline away from collapsing entirely. Every dollar, every family who trusted that fund with their child's care. He was terrified of what exposing it would do to the wing he'd spent his whole career building. So he asked you to help him disappear instead of helping him prove it, I said, and it wasn't really a question anymore. He asked me to buy him time. Talbot's hands were shaking now, folded so tightly in his lap they'd gone pale at the knuckles. He said if the fraud came out while he was still standing behind that fund's name, it would take the whole wing down with him. Years of donor trust, gone overnight. Real children losing real care. He said if he was already gone, already grieved, the board could quietly restructure everything without a scandal attached to a dead man's memory. I told him that was insane. I told him no. He looked up at me for the first time since I'd sat down. And then, 4 days later, his car really did go into that river in a storm, and I was the one standing at the scene, and I had a choice to make in about 6 minutes that I have regretted every day since. What choice, Dr. Talbot? The body they pulled out 2 days downstream was too damaged for a clean visual identification. Rain, current, impact. It does things to a body I won't describe to you. I had his personal effects, his car registration, dental records I could have requested but didn't. And I had a man alive somewhere, hiding, who had begged me 11 days earlier to let the world believe he was already gone. His voice cracked on the next part. So I signed the certificate the way he'd asked me to, before he ever asked me to. I told myself I was closing a case, not opening a lie. I have spent 15 years telling myself that distinction actually means something. I sat very still, the way I do in a hospital room when a family is about to hear something that will reorganize their whole understanding of a person they loved. Is he alive right now, Dr. Talbot? Today? And here is where the ground shifted a second time, the way it so rarely does just once. Talbot shook his head slowly. No, he wrote to me twice. The first year, from somewhere near Nashville, under a name I never asked him to say out loud. Then nothing. I hired someone privately, years later, guilt eating at me worse than any malpractice board ever could, and what I found was a death certificate. A real one this time, filed under the name he'd been living under. Natural causes. 5 years ago, no family listed to notify, no obituary, no one at that funeral home who even knew to reach me. Virgil Hooper has been dead twice, Dr. Winters. Once on paper 15 years ago, and once for real, quietly alone, 5 years after that. And I don't believe a single living soul besides me, and now you, has ever known both of those things were true at the same time. I don't fully remember driving home that afternoon. I remember calling Nathaniel from the driveway before I even came inside, because I couldn't hold the shape of it by myself for even the length of a hallway. I remember Geraldine's voice on the phone that evening, quiet in a way I'd never once heard from her, saying, "I should have told you what I knew years ago. I told myself it wasn't mine to carry to you. I think the truth is, I just didn't want to be the one holding it." The Children's Fund still exists today, restructured, audited annually, doing exactly the good work Virgil Hooper meant for it to do from the beginning, which somehow made the whole thing harder to sit with, not easier. He hadn't lied to save himself. He'd lied, badly and completely wrongly, to save something good, and in doing it he had stolen 15 years of a true, clean grief from every person who ever loved him, myself included. Sherwin Talbot asked me, before I left his house that day, whether I intended to report him. I told him honestly that I didn't know yet, that I needed to sit with what he'd told me before I could decide what I owed the truth versus what I owed an old man who had clearly spent a decade and a half punishing himself far more thoroughly than any licensing board ever could. He nodded slowly, like that answer was more mercy than he'd let himself expect. "Whatever you decide," he said, walking me to the door. "I'd like you to know I stopped signing certificates I wasn't sure about after that. Every single one since. I think some version of Virgil has been standing over my shoulder in that morgue for 15 years, and I let him make me a better examiner, even while I let him make me a liar." It was the kind of sentence that could have belonged in one of Virgil's own speeches, and I drove home with it echoing the whole way, unsure whether it made me trust the man less or understand him more. I didn't tell anyone at the hospital right away. I sat with it first, the way you sit with any diagnosis, before you're ready to say it out loud to the people it will change. My husband was the one who finally asked the question that mattered more than any of the ones I'd been chasing for weeks. We were on the back porch, the kids asleep, the November air sharp enough to make our coffee steam. "What do you actually want to do with this, Renee?" Nathaniel asked. "Because you can bury it again. Nobody would ever know you found it. Or you can let it out, and it changes how people remember a man half this city still puts on a plaque." I thought about Grant Hooper, 35 years old, defending an uncle he genuinely believed had done nothing wrong. I thought about Sherwin Talbot, an old man in a cardigan who had carried this alone since before my own children were born. I thought about every family who had ever written a check to that fund, believing every dollar of it was clean, and about the dogwood tree I'd planted outside a children's wing in honor of a man who, it turned out, had needed saving himself and hadn't trusted a single one of us enough to ask. In the end, I didn't go to a reporter. I went to the foundation's current board, quietly, with Ramona's documentation and Sherwin Talbot's own written statement, which he gave me without a single condition attached, as if handing it over were the only penance left available to him. The board conducted its own internal review. They didn't erase Virgil Hooper's name from the wing he'd built. The good he'd done was still real, still standing, still saving children every single day. But they added something to the plaque that hadn't been there before. An acknowledgement that the fund had, once, been the site of a fraud he did not commit, and a death he did not, in fact, die. Sherwin Talbot resigned his emeritus status with the medical board and gave a private statement to the state licensing office, understanding fully what it might cost him at 81 years old. Grant Hooper cried when I finally told him the whole truth, sitting across from me at that same coffee shop, and then he did something that surprised me. He asked if he could help fund a scholarship in Sherwin Talbot's name too, because, he said, it sounds like he spent 15 years paying for this in ways nobody made him pay in public, and I don't think that should just disappear quietly either. Ramona asked me, weeks later, whether finding out the truth had made anything easier. I told her the honest answer, which is that it hadn't made grief easier, only more specific. And specific grief, I've learned, is at least a grief you can finally hold with both hands, instead of chasing around a room in the dark. I still don't fully know what to do with my own grief. I buried Virgil Hooper once, cleanly, at 28 years old, certain of what I'd lost. Now I have buried him a second time, at 43, uncertain of almost everything except this. He loved that fund enough to disappear rather than watch it fall, and he loved me little enough, or trusted me little enough, or trusted himself little enough, to let me grieve a lie for 15 years rather than risk the truth alongside him. I don't know yet whether those two things can both be true of the same man without canceling each other out. Some nights I think I've forgiven him. Other nights I think forgiveness was never actually mine to give, because he never stayed around long enough to ask for it directly. He only ever asked a florist to hand it to me once. Enough time had passed that it couldn't hurt anyone still living. I'm still not sure it didn't hurt me. I think it did, quietly, in a place I hadn't checked in 15 years. Geraldine and I talked longer that week than we have in years. Not about Virgil, really, but about all the things people decide aren't theirs to carry to someone else, and how often that decision gets made for the carrier's comfort more than the person left in the dark. I don't know if it changed anything permanent between us. I know it changed something for one evening, and some evenings are enough to build on. Barnes & Bloom closed out its final undelivered order that same month. No more standing ledgers, no more secrets tucked between stems, just a flower shop again. The ordinary kind. I still buy lilies there sometimes. I don't think I'll ever be able to walk past that shop without thinking of every truth two different men once asked a florist to hold on to instead of saying themselves. I drove out to Nashville myself that following spring, to the small cemetery where the man Sherwin Talbot's investigator had traced was eventually laid to rest under the name he'd chosen for his second, hidden life. There was no headstone with Virgil Hooper's real name on it, and I didn't add one. That felt like a decision that belonged to him. Even now, even after everything, I planted a single dogwood sapling a short distance from the plot instead, close enough that I'd know, far enough that I wasn't rewriting a grave he'd chosen for himself. I stood there for a long time in the quiet, in a cemetery 2 states from the one where the rest of this city believes he's buried, and I said out loud everything I never got to say to him 15 years ago, because I'd been too busy believing there was no more time left to say it in. I keep asking myself the same question, and I still don't have an answer I'm fully at peace with. If someone you love disappeared to protect something good, using a lie that cost you 15 years of clean grief, does the good he protected settle the debt he owed you? Or does love that hides itself, even for a reason, still owe an apology it never got the chance to give? I think about Virgil Hooper every time I sign my name to a chart now, the way he taught me to all those years ago in Nashville, and I wonder if he ever imagined that the same handwriting he passed down to me would be the thing that finally caught up to him. I still don't know if what I did, bringing it to the board quietly instead of burying it a second time, was the right call for everyone involved, or just the only call I could live with myself. Grant Hooper still runs that fund. Sherwin Talbot still lives in that same small house, 40 minutes outside the city, though he tells me now he sleeps better than he has in 15 years, which is its own strange kind of mercy. My mother-in-law and I are, for now, speaking a little more honestly than we used to, which for our family counts as real progress. I'd genuinely love to know what you think about all of it. Do you believe a good lie, told to protect something worth protecting, still deserves forgiveness the same way an ordinary betrayal does? Or is a 15-year lie a 15-year lie no matter how noble the reason underneath it? Leave a comment and tell me honestly. I read every single one, even the ones that disagree with me. If this story pulled you in the way I hope it did, do me a favor and hit that like button before you go. It genuinely helps more people find these stories, and it takes you 2 seconds. If you know someone who loves a story about buried secrets finally coming to light, send this one their way. I promise they'll thank you for it. And if you haven't already, subscribe to this channel and turn on notifications, because my story is far from over, and I'd hate for you to miss what comes next. One more thing before you go. I always love hearing where in the world you're all watching from. Drop a comment below and let me know your city, your country, whatever you're comfortable sharing. It means more to me than you probably realize to know how far these stories are traveling, and to know that somewhere out there, someone else understands exactly what it feels like to bury a person twice and still not be sure you've said goodbye to them for good. Until the next chapter of my life finds its way to you, take care of yourselves, and take care of the people who are still here to forgive.